Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Social Flight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have such a fantastic show for you this evening. Pete Bunce is here, President and CEO of GAMA, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. We are going to talk about his background, about all the different things going on at GAMA and throughout the world of general aviation, including the future and where it is all headed. And so before we get to that, as usual, a few housekeeping items. Tonight's broadcast will be recorded and available on SocialFlight's YouTube channel. Just check out YouTube and do a search on one word, SocialFlight, and you'll come up with all of our past guest shows and even all the videos on the project build we have right here behind me of our Titan T51D Mustang getting built here in our house just outside Boston, Massachusetts. In addition to that, of course, we're here to support you and to support general aviation. And we do that through SocialFlight.com and the free SocialFlight mobile apps for Apple and Android devices. It is all free. There are tens of thousands of aviation events, destinations, $100 hamburgers, and of course we have tons of giveaways happening through our Fly to Win challenge. And so if you haven't already, get the app SocialFlight on the App Store. All you need to do is just go flying with it, check in, you get points anywhere that you go, and you only need to get points once within the prize period to be entered in and to win a prize. We just gave away a custom pair of Flying Eyes eyewear, and now we have a Lightspeed Zulu 3 headset that is going to be given away. So it's just so many cool things going on there. And of course, the more points that you get, you also have other opportunities in order to get more chances to win through that. And so with that, I'd like to just begin the introduction. I mean, since 2005, Pete Bunce has been at the helm of GAMA. And in that role, he's traveled worldwide, engaging regulators, policymakers, and elected officials. His mission is to promote general aviation and advance the interests of more than 100 airframe, avionics, engine and component manufacturers, as well as all the maintenance companies that are around the world that support general aviation. His storied resume includes flying F15s and A-10s in the U.S. Air Force, rising through the ranks until he landed in the Pentagon as director of the Air Force Congressional Budget and Appropriations Liaison. Pete is an active pilot with more than 7,000 hours in military fighter and training aircraft, as well as civil piston, turboprop, and business jet aircraft. It really is amazing. He holds an FAA ATP certificate, seaplane rating, and serves on the board of the Recreational Aviation Foundation, as well as Veterans Airlift Command, and so many more different things. I'll tell you, if I were to list all of his awards and accolades, I wouldn't be left with enough time to actually chat with him this evening. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Pete Bunce. Welcome to Social Flight Live. How are you?
Well, great, Jeff. Thank you for that very kind introduction. It seems like lately my whole life has been consumed with sustainability issues for the industry, so that's taken up about 80% of my time. I was never trained or educated in environmental issues, but boy, that's sure become the issue du jour.
Wow. So you've seen a lot of change in the industry, but I'd like to start with your background. If you could just take me back as to, you're at the helm of the whole Manufacturers Association, the pinnacle of the industry. And if you could let me know kind of how did you get there? How did this go from being a kid all the way up to this?
Well, Jeff, I pinch myself a lot just to say, how did I ever become so blessed to have this job? Because I truly believe I got the best job in the world. I got a giant board of directors. I have over 100 bosses and everything, but they all get together. And the greatest thing about GAMA, other than the fact that I got an incredible staff, is that when they all get together, they may be fierce competitors out in the marketplace, but you got the head of Gulfstream and the head of Dassault, and they joke with each other and hug each other and laugh and everything, because it's truly, and that's why we all love this industry so much. They put their competitive hats aside, and what they do is do what's best for the industry so everybody can compete fairly and all boats rise at high tide. But let's see how I got here. Well, this is my third speaking webinar for the day, and I've been asked this a couple times, and truly, people say, well, when did you start flying? And I don't remember, because my aunt operated an airport. She had 11 aircraft, and she was an older sister. My mom had two older sisters. She had no kids, so my mom was getting ready to fly me out before I was even 1 year old to see her other sister in California flying from Wisconsin. And I think what the military designates C-54, I think a 4-engine piston. And my aunt said, no way is he going to get his first ride in a commercial airliner. So she took me up in, I don't know what airplane. And I just don't ever remember not flying. I would always be out there at the airport. My aunt got MS when I was in junior high, so I remember lifting her into a car that had hand controls, and then when I was in high school, taking her to the airport. So I just grew up around airports. I wrote a report when I was in 7th grade that my mom still has that says I'm going to be going to the Air Force Academy and to fly fighter jets. I had a Steve Canyon helmet when I was a kid and had a little cockpit thing. And then when it got time to apply for colleges, I only applied to one, to the Air Force Academy. My mom was so mad at me, and my dad, and they just said, "What are you doing? Apply at least to the other academies." I go, "No, I'm going to the Air Force Academy." And so I was singularly focused. When I got done at the academy, I went to pilot training at Reese Air Force Base. They brought me back, to my chagrin, as a first assignment IP, and as everything else, I wanted to fly fighters right off the bat. But truly, it just goes to show you don't know what you don't know when you're in your early 20s, because I learned so much being a first assignment instructor pilot. And then I was able to go to F15s after I got done with that. Had an opportunity also to go to a program called Astra at the Pentagon, so that kind of set me on a nice trajectory. Got promoted early to several ranks, and got an opportunity to fly fighters all over the place, go to school at Harvard while I was there. But then I was at Nellis Air Force Base, kind of the pinnacle of what a fighter pilot does. I was the deployed forces commander for all the units that were in for a big red flag exercise, had hundreds of airplanes, fighters, tankers, bombers, transports under my command, getting ready to go. And after leading the very first mission, I got a call and said, "Boss, we're being told you have to be in the Pentagon tomorrow." And I go, "What do you mean, Pentagon tomorrow? I'm the commander here at Nellis. I can't leave." And they go, "No, you have to leave, and you got to be at the Pentagon." And then I said, "Well, I can't. I've only got flight suits." They said, your Class A's have already been shipped to. They'll arrive at the Pentagon or arrive at your hotel early in the morning, and you got to report." And I go, "To where?" And they said, "Legislative Liaison." So I was interviewed very quickly, and the general that was interviewing me said, "Well, when can you be here?" And this was in fall of '99, and I said, "Well, sir, my 2 years is up in 6 months." He goes, "No, when next month can you be here?" And that's the way the Air Force works. So I was pulled out of that job very quickly and took over the Air Force House Office, which I had my own office in the House of Representatives, which was pretty cool because I had my own bar. When we would go on trips, all the booze would come back to my office. Whenever we would go on, we called them Codels, but they're congressional junkets to everybody in the real world. And so I would have congressmen come down to my office and have a pop in the afternoon, or just come in and shoot the breeze. And it was a great job. And then I left that job to go over to the Pentagon and run both the House and Senate Appropriations Liaison, which then sent me up in 2005 when GAMA was looking for a new leader. I had the right contacts on the Hill and the aviation background, a lot of General Aviation behind me, that they hired me, and I retired in the Capitol on a Wednesday and started the job at GAMA on a Monday, so the following Monday. So it's just been great, and I've been doing it for about 15 and a half years.
Oh my God, what a wonderful story, and what a ride it sounds like.
Yeah, it's been fun. It was interesting transition from F15s to A-10s. So I went down to Davis Month, and they assigned me as a colonel to go down to Davis Month, and I wasn't even allowed to say the word bomb in the bar as an air-to-air guy without having to buy beers for everybody. And all of a sudden they sent me down to take over the ops group at Davis Month. And fortunately for me, that the wing commander that got assigned was a guy named Conan Corley, who also was an air-to-air guy, never had done air-to-ground. So we would be having beers in his office at night going, "Okay, what'd you learn today? What'd you learn today?" But quickly figured out the ground doesn't move. So you just put the thing on the thing, you point, and you hit the pickle button, and you can drop. And then shooting the gun in the A-10 was just a kick, because it was like a laser. I mean, that 30 millimeter was just, as soon as you pulled the trigger, you saw impacts. And so that was pretty easy to hit things. And of course, we could do everything else. The A-10 was, it's a great machine for the mission it does. You know, I miss going fast, but it was cool blowing stuff up. And as the boss, you know, they'd call me up and say, "Hey, boss, we got a 2,000 pounder today on the schedule. You want it?" And I go, "Well, hell yeah." And then I said, "But I want to drop it low enough I can feel the thump." And so then we were up at Nellis for another exercise, and they said, "Boss, we got a Maverick on the schedule. You want to blow up a tank?" And I said, "Hell yeah." And so I had the wingman go back and film it, you know, as I'm dropping the Maverick and seeing the tank explode and everything. It was really cool to be the boss there.
I like it when the boss gets to do all the fun parts of the job as well.
They like to keep the boss happy.
Oh my God, that is absolutely awesome. And I also like how you started your story, because the idea of saying there is no way that his first flight is going to be in a commercial airliner is what a beautiful sentiment for general aviation.
Yeah, it's, you know, being able to get back from being a military aviator and then to go do general aviation. I was flying out west a couple weeks ago, and I had Rich McSpadden. He goes by Spad. We were both F-15 guys together, but he's the head of the LPA Safety Foundation, and we're both flying together. And we're doing some pretty challenging airstrips out west. And I was in, we were both in Glass Air Sportsman, and then I put him in the left seat because as a former lead of the Thunderbirds, he should be pretty good, and he is really good. And so we're getting into some pretty tight spots. And he goes, "You know, anybody that thinks that GA flying can't be challenging just has to go do this one time." Because, you know, when you lose sight of where you're landing and you got to think about one way in and one way out, no ability to go around in some pretty challenging strips, it really taxes your aviator skills. And then I had the opportunity to buy a Lake Amphib last December. I got an incredible deal on one, got it up in Canada, trained all winter long down in Florida. But that was another part of aviation where you got to know what you're doing. You know, you can do stupid things in a float plane that can get you in trouble, especially one that skips like a rock on the water if you don't bring it in right, and that you got to know what you're doing. So all of that just is so fun, and so it's just as challenging, but in a different way as flying a fighter jet.
Yeah, you know, I've always thought general aviation is so much, you know, it's what you make of it. And the license enables you, their certificates enable you to do things, and then it's up to you to decide if you're going to leave your local haunt or your local things that you're used to doing and start pushing yourself, or try different aircraft, or try different strips, or get new ratings. It really is. There's so many things you can do, and it's one of the things that's so wonderful about it.
And that's why I'm so passionate about being on the board of both Veterans Airlift Command, of course, but the Recreational Aviation Foundation, because our sole mission is to go out and preserve airfields, but also to expand airfields out, especially in the public lands that we have in the country, but also help those that have small strips that they built it, and now they're getting up to the age where they want to preserve it, they want to see it live on. We visited a couple of those strips out in Washington State here a couple of weeks ago, where one gentleman is called Olympic Airfield. His dad built it and had a construction company and moved tons and tons of dirt. This fantastic strip, and it's got a ditch next to it that you can splash in as well. But the young man, now his dad has passed, he wants to preserve it, and he's learning to fly, but he's not an aviator himself. So we're out there raising the RAF banner, gave him an RAF windsock, and say, "You're part of our family now." And we're doing this all over the country. We've got, and they're not just grass strips, and they're not just what we quote say backcountry strips. There's a lot of paved runways out there, and we've got this incredible network throughout the country that's just so passionate about keeping strips open and working with groups like the Nature Conservancy. I mean, who would have thought that we could now get into a relationship with the Nature Conservancy where we can open up strips down in Arkansas near Bentonville, or up in northern Maine, be able to open up a strip in partnership with an environmental group that really does stewardship, but they recognize that if we allow people to aviate into those locations, people can really get passionate about the conservancy of these types of lands. And it's a great symbiotic relationship, and we're hoping that the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service can also see the value in that, because why should people, especially in wilderness areas, why should the only way that you can get there is either on horseback or somebody at a hike for days and days to get in there? You know, there's so many people, Americans, that can't appreciate that wilderness area, and yet when we fly them into a strip in the wilderness area, we're not leaving a trace. We don't leave hoof prints. We don't do anything. We just land on the runway and allow them to get to the heart of those wilderness areas and be able to experience it. And that's what we want to be able to provide to people. And once you do it once, you are hooked.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. You know, we've had John and the Recreational Aviation Foundation here on the show, and I love the concept. I really believe so much in what you just said, that, you know, the key to preservation is accessibility. If people can't see something, if they can't experience it, then how can they value it to do the things necessary to protect it? We have to let them have some access to it in order to have that experience. And it's so nice to see it not be at odds as it is with so many mainstream airports, between conservation and the airport. And it seems like what you're doing and what they're doing with RAF all together is really doing a lot to further that.
And we are working with AOPA too. I've got a great friend who runs their airport division, Mike Ginter, and working with Mark Baker and Mike on trying to open up grass strips that are adjacent to a paved runway at so many of our airports. And really, we got away from that, and airports then got nervous that the FAA may not allow them to do it. They think it might be a little more dangerous and everything, whereas everybody that knows that's landed on grass is safer than asphalt, you know, and it's more forgiving. It's better on your tires and everything else. I'd always pick grass over asphalt or concrete anytime. And so we're making inroads with the FAA right now to help us communicate with airports that it's okay to do that. If you've got an area between taxiways that's good enough and long enough to allow general aviation to land on the grass, you're going to mow it anyway. Why not make it an active runway?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, as you mentioned, you know, with tailwheel aircraft, it's a lot safer to be landing on grass than than landing on something really slick. So talk to me a little bit about GAMA and what your experience has been. You've had a long tenure at this point, and you've seen a lot of changes. What are the biggest things that you've seen change in this industry, and ways that GAMA's been involved in that?
Well, GAMA started back in the 70s. It was the Aerospace Industries Association started to grow in the 70s and became very focused on commercial, civil, and also military. And so the giants of our industry back then, the Olive Beaches and a lot of Harry Combs, other people, had said, we need our own association to be able to focus just on general aviation. So that moved forward, and just before I came to GAMA, the GAMA board of directors decided to open up to non-US companies. Prior to that time, Pratt & Whitney Canada had been a member because of Big Pratt was in Hartford, Connecticut, but up to that point, you didn't have the Bombardiers of the world, the Dassaults of the world, so they opened up. And when I came to GAMA, that's when we went into the big expansion of international members. We opened up an office in Brussels, got that up and going, which now is really a force in Europe. The next step is we had a bunch of the large MROs, Jet Aviation, Duncan, and others come to us and say, you know, we've got this close relationship with airframe OEMs, and we've got to get parts from the same suppliers. Can we be part of GAMA? So we opened up to large maintenance organizations. So we're excited to continue that journey. And then the next step was to open up to rotorcraft manufacturers. It was interesting for a while. Rotorcraft were kind of put in their own category, that they didn't have a lot of the same avionics and same requirements. Well, that's all changed. Obviously, they buy much of the same avionics that we have there. So we open up Bell, petition to want to be a member, and quickly we got Bell and Airbus helicopter. We've added Sikorsky, Schweitzer. We're working on some of the others there. And then the last big change that I've seen is back in 2015, the GAMA staff, we all saw this growing interest in electric and hybrid propulsion and these new types of vehicles, whether you call them urban air mobilities or the different types that are out there. And so to be a member of GAMA, you have to have a product that's certified, or be on a certified aircraft, or be a maintenance organization that works on certified aircraft. Well, that is a barrier to entry for a lot of these startup companies, the Jobies of the world, the Betas of the world, and that. And so I went to the board and I said, listen, if we go and create a associate member category that's a low dollar amount, that where they just have access to the committee that we have working these issues, it will provide them a forum to work together like the rest of you work together. But it's also great business opportunity for each one of our companies to expand the supplier base, but also to do a lot of the things that we need to do, we know how to do to certify product and to get on these machines. So they approved that back in 2015, and we started off at 11 members. Now it's our largest committee. It has over 115 members to it. So both regular GAMA members, but these what we call associate members. And once they get certified products, then they will move up to be full GAMA members. That's part of their requirements for joining. But that has been just an exciting ride. And as everyone knows, the money is really flowing into that side of the industry right now. And it's not Chinese money that we saw really prevalent in the industry 5-10 years ago. This is venture capital coming in. There's SPACs happening all the time out there, and we're not just talking about eVTOL aircraft, the ones that can go vertically. We're talking. We were just out. We had our executive committee out in Washington State. We do a flying event with the RAF, but prior to that, we do our strategic planning meeting. And we went over to Arlington Airfield north of Seattle there and went to the aviation plant and saw Alice. And it was the first time many of us had actually seen Alice. And lo and behold, Alice is going to most likely have her debut first flight here before the end of the year. And we're talking this airplane is far along. I wish I could show you a picture of it because it is incredible what they're doing on it. But their path to certification has been, let's try to make this as, even though it's an electric powered aircraft, let's try to make it as close to a normal business aircraft, business jet that we can, so that we can get through this process quickly. It'll fly just like any other business aircraft, and has 9 passengers on board. We'll have at least 400 plus mile range on it. So you think about what that capability does for even commuter type of flights. And then we have so many, as I mentioned, Joby, Beta, Archer, other companies that are developing product, and you would not believe how far along they are in the certification process. So now we're working with our sister associations to try to get the operational rules, trying to get the vertiport rules out of the FAA, trying to keep the FAA and EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, and Transport Canada, ANAC in Brazil, and now the new CAA that's standing back up in the UK, all aligned, so that once we certify, let's say, one of these products in the US, that it could quickly be validated in Europe and vice versa. Lilium's got to certify over in Europe, and then we've got to validate back this way, same with Volocopter. So all of these companies and the energy that's going behind it and the great concepts, I liken this must have been what the dawn of jet aviation must have been like for our industry, because it is so exciting and there's so much opportunity there. With every opportunity, there comes challenges. We have workforce challenges big time in our industry right now. I was just speaking with the airport's General Aviation group from AAAE earlier today. They echoed what we're seeing, and we've got about a 20% shortfall across the board on technicians to work in our factories to produce aircraft or else to maintain them. also in our engineering field. And so, there's a lot of focus placed on the pilot shortage, but our technician workforce out there in a growing industry is one that I'm very concerned about. And of course, we have supply chain issues that is a product of COVID that we're still having to work through. So we could be producing a lot more aircraft out there and fill our order books in a more prompt fashion than we can right now if we just had the man and woman power and the supplies out of the supplier base to be able to get us the parts and pieces that we need to build aircraft. So it's in a lot of ways a good problem to have. We've got a lot more orders than we can fill right now, but we've got to address this as an overall industry to inspire young people to come want to be part of this industry that we all love because the people in it.
Right, right. Now, when you think about, like, I think a lot of people have that question that I think you've alluded to in most of your answer, which is like, when an organization, when an industry puts an organization together, like what exactly does that then accomplish? What does the organization actually do? And so I think you've explained, like, GAMA basically has this ability to be a singular vocal point of contact to try to push change through and organize things. Can you explain that a little bit more about how that works for a group of in some ways competing companies to have a singular voice through GAMA?
So we work with regulators around the world, to include the CAAC in China, to be able to go ahead and, if you think about certifying an aircraft, each company is working with the FAA or EASA to be able to certify. But when we have industry issues that come to the forefront, the regulators want a collective voice to be able to answer, should we do this, should we not? Is there a better approach? Is there another pathway? So take, for instance, Part 23. That's how we certify light aircraft up to about 18,000 pounds. We had not refreshed that regulation in over 30 years. And so what we did, working with AOPA, EAA, other aviation organizations out there, is we pushed the FAA and said, let's think of a different way to do this. Instead of going and just refreshing a regulation once every 30 years, why don't we go and change the whole paradigm and we start to rely on industry standards, which the regulators are part of. When we go and we use for Part 23 or CS23 in Europe, we use what's called ASTM as the standards bodies. But when we have a meeting of a committee that's dealing with propulsion or dealing with landing gear or dealing with batteries, that we have an international standard that then can be refreshed over time as technology advances. Well, the FAA bought into this lock, stock, and barrel, as did EASA, New Zealand regulators. A lot of regulators around the country or around the world adopted this, and that's what's being used right now for the certification of Alice, for the certification of Joby, Beta, all of these. They're using CS23. There's some special conditions if it's an eVTOL aircraft. The Bi-Aerospace Flyer out in Colorado is going to be probably the first one, I would say, certified under the new Part 23. The Pipistrel aircraft out of Slovenia was certified under CS23 with EASA First Electric Aircraft certified. So that's the future. So that's what we do with the regulators. If you shift over to the political folks, whether you're working with the European Parliament or the U.S. Congress, of course we are very integrally involved with the user fee argument in the last reauthorization. And the way GAMA has a lot of influences, we're big employers in a lot of states, so we can carry a lot, we have a lot of muscle in that regard, and we have great champions. Obviously, the Kansas delegation is no surprise, Georgia delegation, others, because of the number of folks that we employ, but a lot of rural states really gave us a lot of support in that user fee fight. And we had a lot of fallback trenches, I would say, in the battle to be able to stop that. But it obviously doesn't stop there. With the Boeing MAX issue, we had a lot of work with the U.S. Congress to make sure on very complex issues, when you certify an aircraft, that the changes that they wanted to make to be able to do what what they felt needed to be done in response to the MAX, they needed to realize that there are more companies that are affected than just Mother Boeing, that there's hundreds of companies that would be affected. And so we went up and we spent a lot of time, and we obviously coordinated very much with Boeing and Airbus, because Airbus was very concerned that the Congress was going to overreact with bad information and that the FAA would be forced to do things that they shouldn't do for manufacturing. So we were able to go up to the Hill, explain certification in countless numbers of meetings when we take our technical experts up, and be able to try to put it in a form that a senator or congressman could understand, but more importantly, that their professional and personal staffs could understand, so that they could do common sense legislation. And what they did come out with was mandating safety management systems for manufacturers and maintenance organizations, which is something that makes sense. And now the trick will be to go ahead and tailor it so that it can fit a big company and a smaller company, and that's what we're working on right now. Currently now we're in the appropriations process, and those of you that have been watching the news, there's a lot of energy that this administration is putting behind sustainable aviation fuels. So we're working hard to get the blender's tax credit passed. We're also working to be able to go ahead and what this legislation that deals with advanced air mobility, to be able to put the Department of Transportation in charge of bringing in DOT, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and have DOT the lead agency to coordinate what we need to do to hasten getting these aircraft into the system. And then a big one that we were working the last couple of days, all of us, all the leaders of HAI, MBAA, NATA, AOPA, EAA, we were all on the phone yesterday with our technical and government affairs people trying to figure out what we're going to do on leaded avgas and how we can accelerate what we call the PAFI program, the Piston Aviation Fuels Initiative, to be able, if we can get more money, and the administration came in with $4.8 million was their request for FY22, the House more than double that to $10 million. We're hoping that the Senate can see the wisdom in being able to give us some extra government money to be able to accelerate the PAFI program, to be able to test the fuels that are in the process, and also hopefully be able to get GAMA to join in the PAFI program and get some money to be able to robustly test their fuel through the PAFI mechanism, which will speed their process. They've chosen the STC pathway, but we've got to be able to test on high compression ratio engines. So we're asking Congress for help with that. The European Commission is doing a whole bunch of things on environmental sustainability, so we're very engaged with the Commission over through our Brussels office in being able to try to make them recognize how the book and claim system can work for sustainable aviation fuel, and it goes on and on. So, so that's really, we work with regulators, we work with elected officials, European Parliament also we engage in heavily, and administrative groups, whether it's the White House. We were on a big seminar with them last week before they did their SAF initiative. We're doing the same with the European Commission.
Sounds like there's a lot going on. I mean, let's talk COVID for a minute, because that seems to have been one of the major impacts on general aviation over the past now 18 months or more, and it's a uniquely interesting impact in that aircraft prices have gone up. The idea and the attractiveness of being able to fly through general aviation has gone up due to perceptions of safety and things like that. And at the same time, there's been all these challenges on our entire industry with the supplier side, and as you mentioned, with talent. What have you seen in your tenures through this experience, and where do you see things going moving forward?
So, Jeff, if you look at the impacts of COVID, so we just released our second quarter numbers last week. And so although we're up from 2020, we're still not to where we were in 2019. So we have not fully recovered yet. A lot of that is due to the supply and labor constraints that we have on the industry right now. Did we fare better than our commercial brethren that build big iron aircraft, whether it's Boeing or Airbus or part of Embraer, obviously, with their offerings out there? Of course, we fared better. People were still using business jets to be able to do a lot of personal travel, although business travel was very restricted, so that somewhat repressed our business aviation market. Helicopter market was very repressed. If you remember what happened to energy prices during COVID, they just went through the floor. So people weren't going out to the rigs. There was a lot of idleness there, so hurt a lot of what we were doing the rotorcraft side. On the piston side, it was a different story. On the piston side, people had a lot of disposable income, a lot of time on their hands, and people that said, I always wanted to fly but never had the opportunity. And I'd be on the phone with Mark Baker or Jack Belton all the time going, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And out there, because the piston market was just on fire. And it was great. I mean, seeing people out there, the flight schools were full and everything, even with all the airline pilots that were furloughed, we've got people out there coming out our ears, and it's a good problem to have on the piston side. And so the training market was very robust. So, you know, our job will be to be able to keep rolling here. You know, those that have been watching the used market across the board, I mean, there are not a whole lot of aircraft for sale. I was talking with Ed Bolin and looking forward to MBA base out there. His static ramp, where a lot of companies would go and rent space to be able to show an offering of a great business jet they have for sale. There's nothing available right now, so he's got a lot of room on his static display ramp out at Henderson because there's just not the offerings on the used side. So again, good problem to have, but I sure wish we could get our labor and supply shortages taken care of so that we can go ahead and produce and meet the demand that's out there.
Yeah, you know, on one hand, it's obviously, as you mentioned, it's a good problem to have. There's a lot of people out there who own aircraft and it's great if they could go and look at a number on a sheet of paper about what their plane is worth right now. But ultimately, I think these dramatic swings back and forth don't really benefit an industry. We need stability, obviously, and growth that people can plan for. And we still need to, as you mentioned, fill all of those ranks of talent to keep our industry strong and fill the demand. And hopefully there's a blessing in that people have seen the value of general aviation and how important it can be when you're concerned about what's happening with commercial aviation or anything like that. What's GAMA doing to focus on the talent pool and on that side of long-term planning? Because we obviously, it's just not good for anybody with 20% vacancies in everybody's labor force.
Well, Jeff, I gave an hour-long presentation to the Boeing Reconnect conference this morning just on that subject alone. So very quickly, I'll go over. So what we did at GAMA back in 2013 is I got together with Mark Van Tyne, the head of Jepson at that time, a good friend of yours as well, my best bud, and we came up with a concept: how can we get young kids involved in all the elements of aviation, the flying, the designing, engineering piece, the construction piece, and then also the maintenance piece. And we, over a fair amount of wine one evening, we came up with this brainstorm idea that I knew of where a kit was for Glass Air Sportsman available that I could get a hold of. And Mark's wife, Trish, had said she kind of liked the Glass Air. So I said, why don't we build 2 airplanes in the 2-week to taxi program out of Arlington, Washington. We'll have a national competition for high school kids to come together. And I know of this software called Fly to Learn software that we can send out to the kids and have them virtually redesign aircraft. We'll judge it and all that. Well, that thing took off. It's now called the GAMA Aviation Design Challenge. We've done it every year. And the Holy Grail is not the winning team that we took out to Arlington, Washington, to build an airplane in 2 weeks. The Holy Grail is all the schools that got to do and compete in the process and study how to build aircraft and design them. And now we have the second place winner gets Redbird goes out and brings their flight simulators to their school. This year, because Glass Air is kind of in a restructuring phase right now, we took them out to Cub Crafters in Yakima, Washington. So I was there 2 weeks ago, and these kids came out of Rysbeck High School that won this year, which is the aviation high school right across the street from Boeing, the Boeing facility at Boeing Field there in Seattle. These kids just blew me away. They were the sharpest young people I've seen in the world. They were going home at night, and what Cup Crafters did is they said they wanted a breakaway headset so that if there was a crash, you wouldn't have pointy things sticking out that somebody could hurt themselves with. And so they had them design and come up with a design for a breakaway headset. They got to design it and build it on the 3D printer, then work the machines and actually install it. And Comcraft is going to use their design here going forward in their aircraft. It was a tremendous experience, but what we've learned out of running this design competition is that we have to partner across the board with other associations that are doing great things. All of us should be familiar with what AOPA has done with their program, the You Can Fly program, and the curricula that they've developed along with Purdue University that they make free available to high schools out there. We're partnering with the Airline Pilots Association, ALPA, and NATCA, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, on this program called Aviation Works for You that shows all the disciplines that you can go into in the military. Boeing is pioneering this thing called Boeing Future Force, which is developing a program to take military veterans that are coming out of the military and their families, their spouses, and showing them what jobs are available in the industry, providing a pathway to streamline training for those different jobs. And, you know, you don't have to be in an aviation part of the Marine Corps or the Army to be able to have a skill we need. You can be working on a tank, or you could be working in the admin office at a base, and that we need you to come to our industry. We're also very actively involved in this advisory board that was called for in the last FAA reauthorization that the last Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Chow, appointed the whole board to work on the issue of bringing more women into aerospace, and it's chaired by Heather Wilson, who is a former U.S. Congressman, Air Force Academy grad, by the way, active pilot. She's also was the Secretary of the Air Force and now the president of the University of Texas, El Paso. And what she's going to do her first report out later this fall, but we've got some folks from our companies and also from GAMA serving in there. But what they're learning is that one of the impediments to getting women into our industry is that if we taught STEM on at an early age, it turns young girls off for whatever reason. We don't exactly know why, but if we talk aviation, they get excited. So we need to change the paradigm of how we talk to them, but we also need to talk to them earlier. If we wait till high school, it's too late. We need to get at them at middle school or even slightly before. So what we're trying to do, and we're very encouraged by what's happening at some middle schools where they're getting aviation curricula. Last week, I don't know if you read in the trades that in Enid, Oklahoma, the Air Force is helping the local high school develop an aviation course, and the Air Force is paying for the teachers to be trained. The Colorado Skies Academy, which is right across the street from the Clay Lacy ramp at Centennial Airport in Colorado. Mark Van Tynus helped start that. But it's right across from the Boeing Blue Skies Academy that will then also be next to the Black Skies Academy that Sierra Nevada is going to support. So we're getting middle schoolers involved. And then we've got to connect the aviation high schools in this country, get counselors to understand the opportunities in aerospace, and get parents to understand that, you know, we can take a young person, if they're not ready for college or they don't have the financial wherewithal, send them to our companies, we'll train them, and if they perform well, they're going to have avenues to get higher education that our companies will help finance. Mm-hmm. And so there's just so many things happening, and emphasizing what's happening in electric and hybrid propulsion in this new area out there. There's a lot of communications that we have to do as an industry, and what GAMA is trying to do is work with a lot of these and connect the dots, connect people together so that they're talking and sharing ideas. You know, the academy that's down there on the Sun and Fun grounds, or the aviation high school there, needs to be talking to Risebeck. It needs to be talking to these other schools so that they can share lessons learned. What motivates kids? What's the best way to hook them and get them into our industry?
That makes a lot of sense, and it's so exciting to see that approach from younger and younger ages, because it's so sustainable and it keeps progressing as time goes on. And you know, another area is also, and you touched on this, the people at an older age too, already perhaps in the workforce or early in the workforce. It seems to me that there's a large population of people with technical skills that have not been applied directly to aviation, that simply are fairly ignorant of general aviation. They've just never been exposed to it. There's no one, they don't know the first thing about it. And yet their eyes light up when they do meet someone who tells them about it or explains what the opportunities are. What are your thoughts on being able to reach existing people on a more short-term level for the industry? Short-term meaning that they'll be permanent, but short-term meaning we can bolster our ranks, we can get people into the training loop and working in the industry quicker.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and if we look at general aviation or even aviation as a whole, most of the people in this industry look like you and I. There's no doubt about it. We obviously, I addressed, we don't have enough women in there, but we also, we're not diverse enough. But, in big cities around this country, we have a lot of people working and doing cool things in the automotive sector. People that are here that are skilled with their hands. Have we reached out to that community? I like to use as one example, there's a program here in Washington, D.C. that's run by the University of District of Columbia that takes young people, and most of them are Black Americans, and takes them over and puts them in a program over at National Airport. They have a hangar dedicated to this A&P program. Well, they have one of the highest success and graduation rates of any school in the country. All of these, most of them are young men, but there's a few young women. They all have jobs before they even graduate. Their test scores are high, and most of them are making more money than their parents make in a starting job. And yet, when a lot of folks have gone to the University District of Columbia to say, well, we want to promote that program, we've got money toward it, really their focus is we want them in a 4-year type of program, not the trades and everything. And so, we still have to break through this paradigm that you gotta right away go to a 4-year school, whereas just as I mentioned, if you come work for one of our companies, we'll help you with follow-on education if that's what you want to do. But you can make a good living, a real good living with trade skills right now in the U.S., whether it's in aviation or whether it's any place else. I know my kids will never be able to fix a plumbing problem to save their life. They can hardly know what a wrench is or anything else. They're going to have to call a plumber, and anybody that's had any plumbing done recently knows what you pay for it. You can make a good living as an electrician plumber out there if that's what you're so inclined to do, and you don't carry a whole lot of worries home with you during the day if you want to do that. So we've got to do a better job of going out there and saying what aviation has in store for you. At that Boeing presentation I was talking about earlier today, we showed a couple clips from a video series that we at GAMA had promoted that show young people in all of our companies that are developing cool stuff. And we showed what a factory line looked like, after World War II, and what a factory line looks like now, and all the additive manufacturing they're doing, or the CAD work that they're doing in design. I highlighted a young lady, her name is Bailey, who works over at Garmin. She was the project manager for Autoland. Now, if you think about Autoland, we have it on the M600, on the TBM, and we have it on the Vision Jet. And that will expand here as we have more auto throttle available out there. But that program changed the world. When you think about somebody being able to push a button and an airplane is going to land autonomously on transmitting, doing everything safe. And I'll tell you, the process of getting that certified by the FAA was like pulling teeth. But fortunately, the FAA administrator worked with us. The head of air traffic control worked with us, put one of her senior executives on it. And my compliments to them, once we had to raise the program or the problems to their level, they started breaking down the stovepipes so we could get that certified first on the M600, but then EASA certified very quickly afterwards the TBM, and we got it validated very quickly back this way, and then Cirrus did it with the Vision Jet. But that was a young lady, a project manager for that, and I think she's also grew up flying in the backcountry of Idaho and everything, so she's a passionate aviator and everything, but I think she's only like 32 right now. And she changed the world. It's so exciting, and we want to highlight people like that.
That is absolutely amazing, and it brings me to really the next question for you, which is where do you see General Aviation going? What is next? What's in the future? What's your 5-10 year look on what you've seen, what you see happening now, and how we're going to kind of emerge from COVID and chart a different path or an accelerated path forward?
Well, I think we have the FAA, a good FAA that understands that we can put modern technology in some of these older aircraft and be able to make them far safer. I mean, how many people, I mentioned I have a lake amphibian. As soon as I can, a lot of the steam gauges are coming out of that. I'm taking out the vacuum system and, you know, entering the modern world of avionics here. But beyond being able to keep older aircraft flying, some of the new aircraft that are coming out, can we go and reduce some of those barriers? Will the Mosaic program allow us some more flexibility in being able to get very safe aircraft into the system at a different price point? We're working with our colleagues at EAA on that process because we are supportive. The more people flying helps the entire ecosystem, because eventually people will move up in aircraft, and so we're very supportive of that concept. Electric aviation provides a neat opportunity. There are challenges with that. You know, how you know, if an airplane is so simple to fly, how do they transition between other aircraft there? Even some, as we explore the flight training concepts for, let's say, the Joby or the Beta aircraft, they're going to need to have, we aren't going to call it a type certificate, but they're going to have unique training in how to operate a very autonomous type of aircraft. But is that more like a tailwheel endorsement, that then if they go and they went from Beta to Joby, that they just get another endorsement that they're good after some training in that? And then how do those pilots now feed into the larger ecosystem? So a lot, you know, I've heard from some airline pilots, they say, oh God, we can't have those guys, they don't have the skills. Well, I'm sitting there going, well, okay, at least in the initial phase of this, they're going to have a PPL, they're going to have a commercial license, so they've been through that training, but now they're building time in the system, and they're listening to the radio call, they're part of the system, they're getting data transferred to them in electronic format. The airplane may not turn with roll and yaw like you and I are used to, because if you move the controller, it all depends on which motors and how much wind is blowing, how it turns, and it may just turn on the yaw axis versus rolling and yaw at the same time. So, you know, they don't fly the same way, but there are a lot of skills that they'll be able to build flight time and experience with that then can be useful to fill the ranks of the airline communities and be able to get their ATP. So I'm very excited about the future. We have to address the labor issue. I think the supply issue will sort itself out over time. But if we've got the technicians and the engineers in our workforce, and we pay them enough, we pay pilots enough, our future is just fantastic for this entire industry. We can't let airports close on us. I am very concerned of what's happening out at Reed Hillsdale right now, because we as of yet don't have the solution proved for high compression ratio engines that need that 100 octane. So if they move too quickly to ban leaded fuel without allowing us the time that we need to find one solution or multiple solutions, and then have the time available to produce the fuel, because it's one thing to have the fuel pass through tests. It's another, are we going to be able to produce it in quantities and then have it available through the distribution network that doesn't cost twice as much as what gas costs today? We're all very concerned about that. So there's the more you scratch the surface on that issue, the more tentacles it has, that this very fragile ecosystem of fuel that's out there right now is one that we have to operate very methodically and carefully. If the EPA does issue an endangerment finding, which we expect them to do on leaded fuel in the not too distant future, 6 months to a year, what is that going to do to communities that may want to use that as an excuse to close down an airport? so there's a lot of things that we have to do to preserve what we have now, and of course then work with Recreational Aviation Foundation and others to build new or preserve airstrips that are out there in some of the public lands and on private lands.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there's so many different divisions or areas of aviation all that seem to be coalescing. And sometime over the next 5 to 10 years, will be all the eVTOL, all the different types of things that somehow will form the next thing we call general aviation.
Well, I was talking to the AAAE General Aviation group today, and I said one of the things that I asked for that we work together with them on the next FAA reauthorization, which is coming up next year, we're going to have to start working it hard, is right now if you put a solar array out on an airport, most of the time you have to then pump that energy into the utility grid, and you can't resell it or you can't sell it. It's the utility company that sells it. Well, if we produce it on an airfield and we can use it for charging up aircraft, why can't we commoditize that so that the airport is incentivized to be able to go ahead and put solar arrays out there, generate that power, and then think about people that are parking their electric vehicles that can also, that's a great storage capability for energy during the day. So this incredible infrastructure that we have out there of airports around the country, not just in urban areas, but in rural areas too, we can really use that if we think about it carefully and be able to make it a place where airports can make some money like they do on fuel sales, but then help propel this new electric industry forward.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Pete, I want to end on one last area that I know you're really passionate about and help spread the word for, and that is the Veterans Airlift Command. And if you could tell me a little bit about that and the work that you do with them.
Well, our air boss, Walt Fricke, was severely wounded in Vietnam. He had his foot blown off flying a Huey over there in combat. And the experience that he had coming home and in the VA hospitals, and the fact that he couldn't get together with his family, really, when 9/11 happened and we went into the global war on terror, he just said, "Not on my watch. This isn't going to happen." And he had progressed in his career to a point where he could go and devote his energy toward forming Veterans Airlift Command. I knew Walt through air show business and everything, and he asked me to come on his board. And I have a son that was wounded very severely in Iraq, so it was a personal issue for me. And we also brought on another one of our buddies, another Air Force Academy grad from my class, Tim Fida, to serve together to be able to build this out so that we can bring folks that volunteer their aircraft, and either they're owner operators or they have some air crews that can fly for them, and fly these young men and women to, it started just to medical care that they needed very severely, going back and forth, like if they had to have prosthetics. Walter Reed here in DC is the epicenter for that, but if they were burn victims down there in San Antonio, burn hospitals. And so originally it started to be post 9/11 veterans going to medical care, but then we quickly found out that a lot of these young people had to be reconnected with their units when their units came home, so we expanded it to that. Now we've started flying some veterans from other wars, so it has grown, and as we come out of this global war on terror, we know that there's going to be requirements throughout the lives of these veterans, but also Korean War veterans, Vietnam veterans, Desert Storm veterans, that we've got to keep attending to. So it's a great program. It's all volunteerism, but the differences that we've made and the inspiration that these young men and women do to the pilots that fly them is just, it just makes your heart sing. I mean, we have quadruple amputees that have lost all of their limbs that now are leading phenomenal lives, and we've been able to fly them because it's just really a terrible experience for them to go through the TSA line with all of their prosthetics and that, it produces some hardship on both them and their families. And to be able to do that, have their service dog come along with us on a VAC mission and take them where they need to go for those morale trips or for those medical trips, and that it's a great opportunity, and I'm just honored to be able to serve that community.
Well, it's so wonderful that you do that, and I appreciate everything that you've done in explaining both your story and all the contributions that you continue to make through both your personal work and also through GAMA for General Aviation. And so I'd just like to say thank you so much for taking your time to join us here on SocialFlight Live tonight. I really do appreciate it.
And Jeff, my compliments to you for starting this SocialFlight Live. It's really a cool concept, and getting folks together to have these fireside chats, I think is very important to spread the word. So you're doing good work, and I really appreciate it, and I look forward to tuning in when my buddy Mark will be with you in a couple weeks.
Absolutely, yes. And so thank you again so much. And thank you to all of you who take time out of your evening every Tuesday night to join us here on SocialFlight Live. We are here to support you, to support General Aviation, and to help keep this entire community together, thriving, and moving forward as it has through the crisis and way beyond that into the future. And so with that, I'd like to thank you all and wish you all blue skies.